and growing. The numbers are probably growing at about maybe 80, 90 a week at the moment, from my estimations. But again, I'll try and quantify that in more specific terms later on in the year. So as far as I can maintain at the moment, there's about 2,000 people at the moment in Ireland going through the process of legally challenging, from this context, from the context of this book anyway, legally challenging the banks.
And just to quantify that as well and qualify it in another way, Darrel, potentially we're talking 2,000 families here.
Correct. Yes.
And I think that's very important to mention. This is all about family.
Yep. Yeah.
Banking has basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're coming at this from the position that the banking process has actually destroyed not only your family, but it's in the process of destroying families all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that's, I say what, you're very good at making these points, putting the worms in there. So, 2,000 families, potentially more, and as I said, it's growing 80, 90 a week, and it'll probably grow faster, larger over the next few weeks, because we're doing talks, we're doing workshops all over the country, and with the radio, tnsradio.ning.com, it's been broadcast worldwide, and as you know, Vin, and as we both know, there's people in Australia, America, the UK, I think even Rio de Janeiro, there's people there in South America, New Zealand. I know that Greece, there's people in Greece who are finding inspiration and information from tnsradio.ning.com.
Guatemala, everywhere, you name it.
You look at the globe, really, on the globe. There's people all over the globe using this information now, and it's working. All I can say is, in the context of the book, with anybody and everybody that's been working with this, not sticking strictly to the script that's in this book either, because it's just more information. But none of them yet have gone to jail, and they won't, my understanding. They haven't had their legs broken or their bodies smashed up, and they haven't lost their homes. None of them. And they're all independently and interdependently. They're challenging the banks. They're challenging the corporations. They're challenging the government. They're challenging the councils. They're challenging them on the fronts of mortgages, loans, credit cards, finance, debt, fines, fees, charges, notices, demands, anything that involves taking money out of your pocket. They're challenging. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we understand at the moment that there has been a precedent set in the courts in Dublin. Not an obvious one.
This one in relation to the business rates.
Business rates, that's right. Okay. Now, this is a major one, I think. We all know now at this stage that business rates are, not contractually obligatory. Okay, because of different things. And again, you'd have to start studying legalese and the definitions of different words and all that. But a friend of mine, I think it was over 2 weeks ago, and he's sending me the verifiable documents to verify what I'm just about to say. Okay. I haven't seen them yet, I just want to say that, but I will have seen them in a week or two. He basically had challenged one of the Dublin City Councils, or one of the Dublin Councils, on what the rates were for. So he wanted to know initially, why they were asking him to pay rates. And this goes back 2 years, so there's 2 years worth of rates here we're talking about. And again, initially they shut up shop. Then they said to him it was based upon the Poor Law Act 1838, I think, if my memory serves me right.
That's correct, yeah.
Which is part of the UK English Poor Law Act, predating that again, 1834. So it was the UK, i.e. a Crown Act, or a bit of legislation that was brought in, that the Irish government seems to have, adopted in terms of applying rates. The initial idea behind the Poor Law Act 1838 in Ireland was to help the poor and indigent of Ireland. I know we're sort of going off tangent here a little bit, but I think it's very relevant because it's rates, and it affects an awful lot of businesses, obviously, and businessmen and women. And again, families. We're not just talking about businesses here, because businesses here provide money, and they provide food and sustenance for families.
Well, I don't think we're going off tangent, and I'll tell you why. Basically, the Poor Law Act that's what was used to set up the workhouses.
Yeah, that's right.
We're heading right back there again, Darrel.
Yep.
Very quickly. Yep. And they will use that finance to set up modern versions of workhouses.
Well, I don't think we want workhouses, though, Vin, to be honest with you. And this is what this is why I'm going down this route. I don't want workhouses. I don't think we need workhouses. I don't think there's any need for it, because if people if people can facilitate running the economy in an honest fashion without, as you say, the interest, which is the fraud, then this country will get back on its feet. And I'm not just putting this out as rhetoric, because I've learned myself that I can adapt and I can change, and I don't need the use of their commerce and the way they do it in order to survive and get on. So back to the point of the Poor Law Act. So this friend of mine, he simply asked questions about he asked questions about the rates, what the rates were based upon. So they told him it was the Poor Law Act. And I think they actually made a fundamental error in telling him that information, because he wanted to know then how that applied to him, albeit it was a UK or Crown statute. But they didn't answer the question. They didn't actually fundamentally answer that question for him. So he said, okay, right, now, based upon the fact that you haven't answered the question, I'm assuming it doesn't apply to me, can you provide me with a valid contract, an invoice, a set of accounts, so on and so forth? And of course they didn't. And they still went down the route of pursuing him with a solicitor, which he basically rebutted and told, well, it's none of your business, you're a third party, and I've identified you as a third party, so I've told you you're a third party, so you have to leave me alone. And they proceeded anyway to issue a summons, and they proceeded, irrespective of the fact that he didn't recognise any of that stuff, he didn't give them any level of joinder, they proceeded with a case. And on the day the case was supposed to be heard, he got a letter a week later to say that the case had been discontinued or abandoned. I think discontinued was the words, but I think abandoned might have been mentioned as well. But again, I'll wait for the documents of that. So he thinks it might have said...
In other words, what you're saying there is that they haven't actually created a precedent in law. In their legal land, what they've done is they've just pulled a handbrake. They've just put the brakes on it.
Correct.
So it's on pause.
Well, I tell you what, it's a pretty severe pause, isn't it?
It's a hell of a pause. Well, it's like, I mean, look at the Scottish Courts of Session. It's just been one continuous session since 1852 or something like this. It's been in session ever since.
Well,
and I think some of the Scottish guys out there need to do a bit of research there. There's a little hint from Vin.
A hint from Vin. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by the Scottish stuff, so obviously you've done a bit of research on it yourself. So, look, I think that says a lot that, as you said, they put the handbrake on. And like he himself is shocked. He thought, well, what they're going to do is issue an order of some sort and then try and bring the sheriff and so on and so forth. But we're prepared for that also if that happens. But no, they've basically said, no, we're not going to continue with this at the moment. And they've left it at that. So that raised an eyebrow with me, as it did with him. I thought, okay, well, we need to explore the rates thing a bit more. What's going on here? Okay, so that's what we're doing, and we're going to talk about it over more time. So where were we with the old book then? I suppose, where did we get to with the book? Because I've sort of lost track now with that. Okay, so, oh yeah, I know where we were. I'd written the third letter to Anya McInerney, and she hadn't responded. Right. And what I was doing then was sending back the letters and all the other stuff, all the paraphernalia and the paperwork, no contract returned to sender. And this continued on. Then it came to a point in time when I got chased by a solicitor called Ivor Fitzpatrick. Now the bank at this stage had not given over anything; they just had ignored me for a period of time. So Ivor Fitzpatrick, his name, the solicitor, Ivor Fitzpatrick and Company, had chased me, and
when you
they
say
used
chased,
sorry, go on, Vin.
When you say chased,
wrote me. They wrote a letter threatening me to say that they would basically take me to court if I didn't pay up, if I didn't pay the debt, ignoring the fact that I'd made requests for the verification of their claim, of the bank's claim. This third party interloper, as Mary Elizabeth Croft would describe them as a third party interloper, and they are in contract law a third party interloper. They pursued me with two different letters, but the first letter they wrote to me was from, I think it was William Corcoran of Ivor Fitzpatrick. And what I did first was William Corcoran, on behalf of Ivor Fitzpatrick, wrote. I rang up William Corcoran, and I didn't record the conversation, unfortunately, at the time. I did have a handwritten record of it, and I still do, of the conversation. And I actually wrote some of the notes and comments that William Corcoran had made in the book. It's in the e-book, or in the book. And basically, I identified William Corcoran over the phone as a third party. I told him to cease and desist from from writing, and he more or less told me that I didn't have a leg to stand on as far as he was concerned, and that he would continue to pursue me and harass me. So I then wrote a letter to him telling him he was third party, but they didn't give up. Then Ivor Fitzpatrick wrote again under the guise of William Corcoran, and I wrote back to them again. Then they seemed to stop for a while. So what I did then was, after I wrote the second letter to Ivor Fitzpatrick, they didn't respond. Then I wrote a fourth letter to Anya McInerney, telling them, because they hadn't responded within an appropriate time. Oh no, hang on, let me go back. I wrote off to Ivor Fitzpatrick a second time, and Ivor Fitzpatrick didn't respond. So what I did was, I reported Ivor Fitzpatrick to the Law Society because I felt they were harassing me. And I asked the Law Society to investigate these allegations that I was making against Ivor Fitzpatrick at that time. To say I felt I was being harassed by this company, that they were third party and they had no business in my business. And and then the Law Society via Ken Murphy refused to investigate the solicitor called Ivor Fitzpatrick. Would you believe it, Vin?
Sure.
Now, I didn't believe it. I didn't think, because again I thought, well, this is a legitimate complaint. It's a legitimate request for them to take action, which is the Law Society, which are supposed to govern and manage and take care and whatever they do to the solicitors and judges and barristers. And they refused point blank to investigate Ivor Fitzpatrick. Okay? And the reason they gave me more or less was they wouldn't take an instruction from me as a layman.
Because you weren't a member of their society.
Because I wasn't a member of their society.
There you go.
Now, I found that very strange. As a layman, I thought, because my mind was still kind of in, well, that's not fair. It's not right.
Would you agree that, according to mainstream media, for example, if this is the kind of attitude that's broadcast out there, that if you have a problem, you can always go to the Law Society and make a complaint type of thing?
Well, that's certainly the perception that I had.
Right.
It certainly is.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, I know, but I just find it quite amusing.
I'm laughing as well. I'm laughing at my own ignorance as well.
Right. Okay.
But in my ignorance, I thought that Ken Murphy, who was the Director General of the Law Society at the time, I don't know if he still is, refused. Now, that's fine. I get that now. But he made a fundamental error as far as I'm concerned, because I'd written off to Ken Murphy, and I'm not sure if I think I had registered the letter. But Ken Murphy claimed, rather than just say, well, we're not going to investigate this, he claimed that he had not received any prima facie evidence in order to base an investigation upon. Mm-hmm. So I simply looked up what prima facie evidence means, and from my understanding of reading it in the law dictionary, it meant, well, the initial evidence that would give you cause to carry out an investigation. Would that make sense? Is that right, Vin?
Sounds reasonable and logical.
Yeah, so prima facie. I don't know the interpretation of those words into English. I think prima facie is probably either French or Latin or both. But my understanding, reading the Black's Law Dictionary, for what I understand of Black's Law Dictionary, is that it's the initial evidence that you need in order to start an investigation. Prima facie.
It's on its first appearance, if you will, or a first sight.
First sight. Yeah. And I had that information because I had the letter from Ivor Fitzpatrick. I had the rebuttal letters, the 2 rebuttal letters I'd written to Ivor Fitzpatrick, identifying them as third party. And I had also got all the other information pertaining to the accusations that the Bank of Ireland were making and the questions I'd asked the Bank of Ireland. So Ken Murphy then reckoned that I hadn't included the prima facie evidence, but I had. I'd actually incorporated the letters and information that he needed to start the investigation in the registered letter that I'd sent him. So he denied having this prima facie evidence, which I'd sent him. But I got it. I called up his secretary and I said, did you receive this? The day I sent this stuff, I phoned her up and I said, have you received this? And she said yes, that she had received it. So he had denied receiving something he had received, and she confirmed he had received it. So I'd caught him out. It was only after that then he said, I wrote to them again, and they said, oh yeah, we did get it, sorry, we mislaid it. We mislaid this evidence. But still, we're not going to investigate it because you're not a member of the Law Society and we're not bound by instructions from you. Okay?
Which, of course, should tell you everything you need to know.
It did. It did.